morning, everyone. Welcome to Talking Horses. Sarah Al-Badwi and Andy Serling as we come upon our claiming crown, essentially, day. A lot of races. We have some maiden races, but interspersed with the claiming races, and 11 to talk about. So we elongated today's show, and of course, a big day as well with the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby.
I know we're getting really close to the actual Kentucky Derby now, and just really one more week of preps that are all across the country and even over in the UAE. So our big weekend next weekend, but some big races today, and I think they'll definitely shape up that field for sure in terms of who's the main players.
Yeah, we'll see some interesting races. Obviously, much more to talk about and along America's Day at the races as well today. Head over to Naira Bets. If you're not a member of Naira Bets, use the promo code MATCH200, and we'll match the $200 of your initial deposit. We have a pick six carryover, 19,000 and change. That'll start in race 6 of our 11 race card today. We also have a bankroll builder, the Arkansas Derby, 50 to win the Arkansas Derby. Win or lose, get $20 for your Kentucky Derby bankroll. And if you're somebody who likes cornucopia at a short price, you can add additional 2 to 5. You can add that to the odds of a horse that will be very, very heavily bet in today's Arkansas Derby. If you like somebody else and you're right, you'll do okay. We have a cross-country Big Five. You've got races 10, 11 here, but you've also got the American Pharoah overnight, an overnight for a Triple Crown winner. There you have it, the Fantasy and the Arkansas Derby, of course. Arkansas Derby post time a little bit before 8 o'clock. They're supposed to be 7:51. I've taken the over, though, for my entire net worth. And we have America's Day at the races. We're on from 12:30 to 3:55, 4:30 to 6:59, so basically 12:30 to 4, and then we'll have a half-hour break. We'll come back, and we'll be on FS2 for that, FS1 for the last hour of the show. We may actually be on FS2 as early, the FS1 as early as 5 o'clock as well on both networks. If you've got all that, then you're ahead of me. Race number 1, I think the conversation in race number 1, which unfortunately, or fortunately was not one of the races affected by scratches, is the pace. And we talk about Short Shift, a horse who obviously beat much lesser rivals last time out. She's part of a pace, though, Sarah, that could include any of Tariga and Splashy. And I think at very least we'll have a relatively honest pace in here. Not necessarily that fast, they rarely are, but at least honest.
I think so. And when you have at least 3 horses that like to have that front running position, you do feel a little bit more like there will actually be some pace to materialize rather than just having the 2 that seem to set up, because usually somebody doesn't go. While she is taking that step up in class, I have her in 4th because I don't think that she's facing as tough of company in this last win, of course, but she's going to have some other horses that want to be forwardly placed as well, which on that class hike, that's to her disadvantage.
And you've taken the number 7, Carol T.
Yeah, I just thought that she was one who had a wide journey last time out and just never really got as involved as I know that she can be. And then 2 back, she had that race going the mile, which is, I think, a little bit further than her preferred distance. So some excuses for those races. And I thought that with that pace playing out to potentially be honest in here, she could benefit from that as well, because she doesn't have to be so far out of it and so wide as she was last time. She gets a more preferable distance. And if you go to her race 3 and 4 back, I think that those are efforts against company that fits here, as well as some numbers that fit as well.
My problem with her, and I don't disagree that she's a player in this race, and I don't think you'll get 8 to 1, but I think she's a horse that, my problem is she has absolutely no consistency whatsoever. I think she does want
That's
less
fair.
distance, but her lack of consistency and the fact that I've taken her a number of times just
I have as
completely
well.
failed to show up. She can win, but I've picked her enough, and I've seen enough of her. I mean, I guess the obvious horse, if you're looking at the race to all par, is the horse who's currently 3 to 2, and that's First Class Cass, and we'll look at her here. I mean, listen, she can win this race. She's not a horse that I would take a big stand against, but I don't need her at a short price because she is not a horse that gets the winner's circle very often. She's pretty pace dependent. And what is her enormous advantage in speed figures over this field that she's supposed to be anywhere close to 3 to 2?
And that's exactly it. While she does have that element of consistency that some of the others don't really have established, she's a horse that likes to come from off the pace. She needs things to materialize ahead of her, and she doesn't have an edge in terms of being so much faster than a lot of others in this field that are going to be slightly better prices, especially if she stays anywhere near the current price, even though it's early.
I agree. I'm not a big fan of her. She's who she is, and she usually shows up with some kind of effort, but it's not that good. I mean, she's not really any faster than Splashy, for instance. And at least in Splashy's case, she's outside the other speeds. Now, I was tempted to take Splashy originally. I picked her last time. She was horrendous last time. Now, maybe
That bothers me.
if you want to manufacture an excuse for her. It's that she didn't like being behind horses, and a speed type horse that wants to be out in the clear, she gets caught in behind horses. That's a bit of a stretch, though, to play a horse back, especially if she's close to 3-1. But of the speed, she's the one I used. I'm taking Intentious because I feel like she's the one that might have a little bit of upside for David Duggan. You look through her races, he's only had her for 2 races. I thought she ran fine trying to go a mile on December 15th. And then last time out, she actually ran pretty well. She made a big middle move in that race. And I thought it was a decent enough effort, better than it looks. Not a real layoff per se, only 2.5 months. But I just felt like she ran better in that race than she's been running. She's going to get pace, and I'm hoping for some upside. And I don't believe that she's going to be as low as 7-2 in here. I'm hoping for a better price. She doesn't have figures suggest to be a short price. So she's my closer. I prefer her over Carol T. We'll see what happens.
She's the one that could take a step forward.
Race number 2. No major scratch in this race, and this is another race to talk about the pace. And I believe it's Adelike. We'll talk about her last race, and there's so much pace in this race between whether it's Savas Melania, Smoking Hot Kitty, Spring Magic, all horses that can be forward. That I think it's going to be a very different pace scenario. And this is a horse that caught a track that was very kind inside speed last time. And while, listen, she's won 5 straight races. She has not lost a race since being claimed by her current trainer, who I'm not familiar with. But to me, this is going to be a completely different ball game for her.
And that's exactly my thinking with her. And she also just seems like one that needs the lead.
We don't know she needs the lead, but she's been able to get it in 5 straight races. And I'm not sure a shorter price you want to take that she's not going to need it. We don't know that she can't rate.
Sure. I think that that's something that we'll see today, because I don't necessarily know if she's going to be in front early, though she could be in here. At a similar price to some of these horses with a little bit more proven form, who have been able to be a little bit more tactical in the past. I just didn't really want her at what's going to be a shorter price with a horse who's had this one way of winning so far. Even though she has built up this win streak of hers, it just doesn't seem like she has any sort of edge and may not be up against it from a tactical standpoint.
Talk about Backstretch Rose.
I was just looking for somebody to come from off the pace, and I feel like that was sort of where you were looking as well, and a horse that just really needs to turn things around over her last couple of starts. But it seems as though she's one that's been facing some good competition and has that string of races that were a bit better than the one that she ran last time, where she has those numbers that make her make sense in here, as well as how this race could play out in terms of having some pace to run into and being able to hold her own against some horses that are okay relative to the field that she's facing in here.
She's not a particularly winning type. I've got her second in this race. I don't know that she's going to be that big a price. We'll see what she goes off. I've got her contender because I wanted closers as well. But I want to take a look at Smoking Hot Kitty going back to September when she won a race and I'm Buzzy finished second. Smoking Hot Kitty has been an extremely fortunate horse. This was a big inside speed track. She ran well, but I think I'm Buzzy also ran well running against the grain of the racetrack. Then, all right, 1.1 miles. She's not a 1.1 miles horse, a much tougher field, the Empire Distaff, and she wasn't going to beat those kind of horses without the lead. The problem is, I think Horacio's done a great job finding the right spots for her, but one of the things he's discovered is that she's a horse that runs well going long, able to use her speed to do it. And she's coming in off a layoff that it's not going to be that easy for her to sort of flaunt her speed in this race. So I'm not a big fan of hers, whereas I'm Buzzy, a horse who last time just got caught by a horse. You know, Savas Melania. Listen, if Savas Melania, who we should talk about, runs the race that she ran last time, I don't think it matters. I mean, 2 back, the 91.
Right.
I don't know where it came from because she absolutely stunk last time out. Yes, they were better horses, but she was awful in that race. And she feels like a horse that's going to have a bit of trouble negotiating what's supposed to be an honest pace. Now, around here, one person goes and everybody snatches and grabs, and they concede races. It's hard to see it happening in here, and I just think I'm Buzzy, a horse that consistently runs okay, has run figures consistently fast enough to win here, and just is hurt by racetracks and by lack of speed. If she can't get some pace today, she'll never get any pace.
Right, and I think, too, it's worth mentioning that we do have a lot of riders that are generally on the circuit out of town today, so we are seeing some new faces, and then maybe someone will be a little bit more aggressive.
Well, who's gone besides Manny?
The usual that are in Florida, and then whoever's out.
But
in
I don't think anybody is left except for Manny, who went down to ride.
Well, I'm saying we do have a lot of different riders today than we usually see on a regular Saturday throughout the card.
You'll point them out to me when we get to them.
Okay, we have a lot of coming in from Parks that aren't always here on Saturdays.
You can point them out to me when we get to them. In this particular race, there aren't any, right?
No,
okay.
But throughout the card
okay.
in general.
Anyway, we'll see what happens in race number 2. Now, I think race number 3, I do think that the Big Field Flu did catch some runners in this race.
Yes.
God forbid we're allowed to run some bigger fields here in the winter. That shouldn't happen. And fortunately, it's not. So we've scratched down quite considerably here, and it really changed the whole dynamic of this race. And we'll start with Grey Wing, who you have on top and I have second, who has been the recipient, and she may get it again, he may get it again today, of two absolutely perfect trips.
Yeah, he's been fortunate. I mean, he's had things go his way over his last two starts. He got him at a little bit of a price last time and not at all so in the start prior to that. But this is also a horse that's in some good form right now and has been running pretty consistently over his last several starts. And with the way that this field has really scratched down and some horses that I think want to be forward in here and I don't necessarily trust in the barns that they're in right now, I just thought that he would sit the right kind of trip and is the most reliable to me of who's left.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with any of that. He's just a logical horse to beat. I mean, Chuck Willis got a gold rail when he won 2 races back. He's a very hard horse to make. Now, is he going to let him clear? Is Dots Dollar going to let him clear? I mean, these are, Romero's the one that has to come out running from the inside.
Right.
If the others want to outrun him, that's fine. But I think he should come out with the intention of being forward and see how things play out. I don't think, you've got Lotta second, I've got her third, is because I just know horses left. I'd like to see that 95 buyer again
I
from
would as
her,
well.
him in this race. And the only horse I could take besides the 5, who's going to be a huge favorite at this point, I can't imagine a scenario where Lotta, coming from out of town on 1 figure, is favored over the local horse, a horse that's won a couple straight. I respect David's line, but I don't believe that's going to happen. And I hope it does from a betting perspective, because I would live and die with Grey Wing and Dots Dollar in here. Listen, Dots Dollar was lucky. He took advantage of a gold rail last time, was able to control on the front end. Having said that, he has had some trips. He's run against some better horses. He's run faster figs. I thought he was an alternative to Grey Wing, who's been kind of fortunate, and he'd be a slightly better price. I don't have a particularly strong opinion after this race was completely shredded by the Big Field Flu.
Right. I mean, we saw a lot of contenders in here come out completely, and so you're left with 3 really to choose from.
Yeah, you're left with a race that is completely different than the one that we both handicapped.
Precisely.
Race number 4, unfortunately, the maiden races did not really come apart today, but you have a horse in 1/900 who neither one of us are inclined to bet against. We'll take a look at finishing second to Colloquial, and we're all looking forward to where Colloquial shows up next. I remember they'd mentioned Keeneland and Hours of 1, or even I think they have the Lafayette the stake there in the spring or something to try for him. I mean, they could have looked at our Bayshore, obviously not going to the Derby, and we haven't seen him, and he's a horse that had a big break between his races, but I think we all want to see him. And I mean, you run a 92 buyer in early February in a maiden race here,
And you
you don't just lose, you get completely and totally thrashed on the racetrack. I mean, if you're Tom Morley, the Nexus horse, you ask yourself, like,
What sort of bad luck
we just
happened
lost
to
a
me?
race that, like, in 100 years, we probably shouldn't have lost. But
Precisely.
the way it happens when a horse like Colloquial shows up in that race. But that was, I'm just not trying to beat this horse. And I hope he wins for Tom.
And also the margin that he had in front of everybody else in that field as
And they
well.
weren't all
and
bums. They weren't a bunch of bad horses. And he
it was a
destroyed
fast
them.
race. I mean, it was a
Right.
fast race, and he just ran into a horse that could be a monster sprinter moving forwards if we see him regularly on the racetrack.
If Colloquial wasn't in that race, there's a reasonable chance that Tom would be pointing to the Bayshore with this horse. And rightfully
wouldn't see why
so,
not.
as potentially one of
Sure.
the favorites. I mean, to put it into perspective, you look at Lee's horse, T-Craft, who's won 3 straight races. Now, he improved last time. He got an 86 buyer. And the buyers aren't the be-all and end-all, but this was a very, very fast race, which you knew at the time. I think the interesting horse, now, I'm surprised you don't have the 8, you have the 8-4. I thought Linda Rice's horse was the one that I would want to improve, more so than Gypsy Dreaming. Gypsy Dreaming feels like a kind of a last time was the time almost horse, whereas I'm going to go to the horse Vow of Secrecy, that I think if you watch that race, ran like a classic Linda Rice horse that's going to benefit from one start. And the reason Jose is riding is, obviously, if you're Jose Lezcano, you're going to ride 1/900 over Vow of Secrecy.
Well, sure. I mean, you and I would make the same choice.
I might fire TJ Campo, his agent, if he had made that decision. No disrespect for Linda. I'm thinking Linda probably gets this
I
one.
think she understands.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think she'll be okay with that.
All right, we'll move on to race 5, and we'll break after race number. What do you think, Eddie? Should we break after 5 or 6? It's your call. We're going to break
Okay.
after 6. Okay. We're thinking of getting Eddie's picture up on the screen during the show intermittently, so you guys can let him participate in the show a little more. I'll get to work on that. Race number 5 is the annual mile and 3/8 starter race, and I didn't bring the program. I do love who they named these horses. They're mostly horses that you wouldn't remember, but I remember very fondly. This race has been the stud muffin in the past.
Okay.
And
I remember when it was
think
called
it
that.
might be, well, the reason that I particularly like the Stud Muffin is that he was a horse trained by Dominic Galuccio, who was such a terrific trainer, as well as quite the personality and very, very popular here. And Dominic, as people know, passed away way too early from pancreatic cancer. And we always have that day in Saratoga, the Lustgarten Day,
Yes.
when the trainers sign autographs to raise money for pancreatic cancer. And Stud Muffin just always makes me think of Dominic. So I particularly like that. And it's nice to have these races. And unfortunately not the only one. That some of these races are named for horse. I think there's a Kelly Kipp. Of course, Chief trained Kelly Kipp, and we lost him as well, though he had a long and great life as well. Probably no person in my lifetime at the racetrack had a more positive effect on horse racing than Alan Jerkins, a man who I don't think no one will ever know how much kindness he gave to people around the racetrack that a lot of other people wouldn't spend a minute concerning themselves with. Alan Jerkins, one of the great human beings ever to be associated with this game or associated with life in general. So winning on weekends, who I have third and you have nowhere in here, and I'm in no way criticizing that. And I wouldn't want to be David making the line today because it's tricky. I mean, this is that race 2 back where for some reason he was 5-1 and he should have been around 2-1, and he
Right.
got loose and he did his thing. Doesn't it feel like, though, with Seeking Unity in here and double your money, particularly double your money,
Right.
I don't think he's going to get loose, and I don't know what to do with him. He's obviously better than his stymie, but is he really as good as this race?
how
I
much
don't,
better?
I don't think that we're supposed to just completely ignore this race because it was 1.25 miles, and distance is the great question in this race because most of them have no experience in the distance.
And that was the thing for me because I thought about him and I looked at that one number that he has and I tried to make the same reasoning for that of being, okay, maybe he just really relished that extra distance and then maybe the cutback as well as the competition that he
But
faced.
even if he runs his high 80 numbers, he can win here. You know, it's not like the only
Sure.
race he has that can win here.
Right. It's just that it's such a standout, and I just wonder, how is he going to be bet? Is he going to be bet on that race versus his prior career to that, or is he going to be one that there's a more realistic approach that he isn't quite that number, but he isn't quite the other
Okay.
numbers either?
All perfectly fair, and I'm not in any way I have no idea what price this horse is.
Yeah,
gonna
and
be
I
in
don't
any
either.
race.
It's
I
just
couldn't make a
speculation.
morning line if my life depended on it. And a day like today is particularly tricky. At 6-1, I think he's usable. I'll put it that way. I don't love him, but if he wins this race and pays $15, I think
Everyone's
you're going to
gonna
feel like kind of a
facepalm.
dope. I mean,
Sure.
I would feel like kind of a dope if I had 4 of 5 in a pick 5 or something, and he was the one who beat me. But
It'd be-
I'm not.
It'd be very
enamored with
easy
him.
hindsight handicapping to then be like, oh, 2 races ago, this is what I missed. But
So
he's not,
talk about
he's
Seeking
not for me.
Unity.
But look, he's one Seeking Unity that just, he's coming first off the claim for Fernando Abreu, who does well when he has horses, switching over to his barn. And while he is one of those ones that's stretching back out to a little bit further than the mile distance, he has gone the mile and an eighth several times previously in his career. And if you just look back at the kind of company that he was keeping over his last couple of starts, even before he was claimed last time out, he's been facing horses that have been in some seriously tough allowance races, if not stakes type of quality fields that he's been in against. And he's even been holding his own in some of those as well. So I think that relative to who he's faced lately, he is getting some class relief and he is switching barns as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth, and he can win. I'm obviously not. I am concerned that he's not going to be a horse that's going to particularly love this distance. And I know he's run bad races before and he's rebounded from them, but for the life of me, I could not make an excuse for his last race. I thought he was just awful in there.
He was.
That's what worried me
He was.
about him. I probably would have had him higher. I was worried about his last race, but like I said, I'm not going to knock him. Let's take a look at Bold Endeavor. Who, I mean, I've got him second. You've got him third. I think he's the morning line favorite. Just seems like a pretty logical horse off his last 2 races. At least with him, you've got a horse that's in the best form, some of the best form of his career.
Absolutely.
And he's run some fast races before, but he's another horse. How confident are you he's going to want the mile and 3/8?
And that's the question with him because he's had a storied career of really learning about who he is and what kind of races he can run. And while he has that element of consistency as well as the good recent form, I just really wonder if he's going to be those ones that benefits from getting a little bit more ground to work with. And I wasn't totally sure that that was going to be the case, but at least he does bring the consistency to the table in here, and so that's something that, of course, has to be considered too. I just don't really know if he's going to be the right kind of price when there are some other interesting horses outside of him that are having some sort of changes, whether with who they've been facing or barn that they're switching into.
It is a very tricky race because there's so much guessing involved. Now I want to look at the race that Mo Rhodes and Strapped comes out of, and you've got Strapped second and Mo Rhodes fourth. I mean, okay, it wasn't Christopher Elliott's fault the horse didn't break in here. And I don't want to, he's an apprentice rider, he's trying to learn, and he's probably a tricky horse to ride. But let's let this roll for a little while, Eddie, and make sure we watch the nonsense that goes on with this horse. He's saving ground, he's inside. It's not like he's a horse that's shown speed. And listen, I'm not going to try to, but whatever the case is, this is a disaster of a trip for this horse. And whereas Strapped got an absolutely perfect trip sitting in behind horse, he's the two on the rail, and it's just going to get worse with him because he's going to end up sort of making you see him, he's having so much trouble, he's making that premature wide move, and there's Strapped, who is in this just absolutely juicy spot for Ruben, sitting behind horses, and this horse already had these shenanigans, has made the premature four wide move. I'm happy for Manny Franco. I hope he wins the Florida Derby. If he doesn't win the Florida Derby, I'm going to yell at him because he wasn't here to ride this horse. But, Lane Ludsey picks up the mount, and I'm impressed what I've seen with Lane. And I can't not bet a horse back like this that was so much the best last time out. I don't know if he can get the distance, but this was 1.25 miles, so I'm going to go with him. I thought he ran better than Strapped. You prefer Strapped.
I think he ran better than Strapped in this race. My question with him is he has that one jump to that 89 by your speed figure. He has the 80 prior to that. All of his other races,
he's too slow. I know it is, but here's my argument, and you're 1,000% right.
It might have been the distance.
It might have been the distance really helped him. That's what that's what I'm hoping for.
I
but
totally
you're dead
see
right.
that.
You're dead right.
And whereas Strapped isn't a horse that's going to always run the same kind of numbers that win this race, he at least has more than that one.
Especially recency. His recent form has gotten good.
And I could be totally wrong.
No, but I think that's totally fair.
That was
and
my reasoning.
I could have had Strapped in there. I'm not wildly against him. We'll see what happens. An interesting race. Let's go on to race number 6. This is a maiden race, so hey, guess who gets to finally run? And I didn't pick today a spun size, and we got the carryover.
We've been
pick
waiting.
6, 19,000. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I bet this horse. This was the first race of the year.
Yes.
And I bet this horse, and we'll take a look at spun size last time out. And yes, I think if Eric Cancel rode spun size last time, that she wouldn't be in here because she'd have broken her maiden. This is what, her 4th or 5th time she's been entered, and the first time she hasn't been scratched. I said, Sarah, this horse is going to be scratched. What are you doing
I thought so
here?
too, and yet here we are. So there is that. But look, this horse is one that finally we do get to see today. And I just think on the recency of the numbers prior to having this string of scratches and not really seeing this horse and potentially what this one can translate over here to New York, just makes sense as being potentially a little bit faster.
Well,
if there's any sort of
I don't know about
replication.
that. She ran just as slow as everybody else in the dirt, and then she got to synthetic, and she ran better. Aren't you a little worried she's a synthetic horse?
I mean, you saw some progressive improvement. It's not as though it was a 31 and then she jumped up to a 70 when switching over to the synthetic. It was a little bit of steps forward with experience, and so I don't know. It's
My problem is
possible.
she's going to get bet off a figure on a synthetic when her dirt races aren't that good. Obviously, she can win. She's just not my cup of tea, and the truth of this race is none of them are my cup of tea. I mean, you've got the 8 third, I've got the 8 third, the 11. I don't know,
going
ran okay
backwards.
first time, but it was a 4-horse field. I mean, yeah, those are the reasons the 1 can win, because even the dirt races aren't necessarily, they're good enough to compete here. The 11 is the 7-2 favorite. So I am not a person who looks to pick first-time starters randomly, and as much of a big fan as I am of Fernando Abreu, I did look it up. In maiden claiming races, first-time starters in dirt sprints, he's 2 for 10 with 3 hitting the board and a positive ROI. She has got no real pedigree, a half to Mel's baby sister. A global campaign. But you know what? This horse shows some decent back works. A New York bred that Fernando shipped up to run in here. And I'm just going to guess with a first-time starter. I have no information. But in this field, I mean, you've got the 7 second because you liked her last time and she didn't run bad enough for you in there?
She just has some speed, honestly. And looking around at this field with some pretty slim pickings, at least with her, you can say she ran into a horse that had a freakish performance 2 back and was big prices, and then she at least has been validating that to run some sort of modicum of consistency
30 and
over
35
the last
buyers.
2. Yep, which in this field, hey, that's enough
Fernando,
to
I hope
be
your
in the
horse
Super.
can run a 50 buyer. You'll be in the winner's circle in all likelihood. We'll take a break. Sarah and I will be back with the late pick 5.
Horse racing? Check. Weekly promotions? Got 'em. Huge payouts? You bet. With Naira Bets. Download the app today and bet on any track, anywhere, anytime with live HD horse races, betting tips and tutorials, expert picks, and more. You bet with Naira Bets. Join now for a new member bonus at NairaBets.com.
Welcome back to Talking Horse. Sarah and I were just discussing briefly the fantasy, and I'd like to take charge of Milady, who scratched from there. And what I'd really like to do is bet $100,000 today that the morning line favorite, Simply Joking, won't be favored. Isn't Quiet Side going to be even money in there?
She'll definitely be favored.
I mean, it just feels like it to me.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be favored, and she's the horse to beat. Race number 7. Yeah, we didn't get completely screwed here. We'll look at La Banquera, who's just way the horse to beat. And the truth is, she's got less speed probably to deal with in this race than she had to deal with last time. And I picked her second just because I've been picking against her and being wrong time and time again. And I mean, listen, she has been sensational in these races. I'm not going to try to make a big stand against her, but I have a little bit of an interest in Killy Start, so I'll stick with her. But there's no big argument against this horse, is there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very obvious pick. She's going to be a heavily used horse in today's entire card, if not probably one
Probably
of
the
the
biggest
most
lean in the pick
in
six.
the pick
sequence,
6
yeah.
and the late pick 5. I mean, even if she doesn't necessarily show up with that 90, she still has a couple of races that are good enough to put her right in contention here, and she should be forward. I mean, I just could not really get to somebody else on top, though. If somebody's trying to beat her, I get it, because you sort of wonder how far can this go. But
I agree. She is a tough horse to trust, even though she's in such great form, because she was so awful after her maiden win. But
Right.
clearly, she's turned it around for
Yeah.
Linda. Tremendous claim by her. And it's one of the reasons they change rules at racetracks for Linda. They laughed at her when she went there to Churchill and played a bunch of horses that sucked, and then they changed the rules. They complained when they started winning. It sounds just
Doing
like
too
horse.
well.
Sounds just like horse racing to me.
of course.
So Killy Start. Okay. First of all, there's nobody else in here, Sarah, that I want to use. Jackson's Dixie got buried by her last time. I guess she can win if the 5 fails to show up, but
Sure.
there's nothing to suggest she can beat her in a realistic situation. So as far as Killy Start, she's actually got some pretty good races. And you go back, I mean, she finished second to Brichane, who's was in good form. She comes out of that crazy straight cars dial race. Where the other track's a bit fair that day, but she was out in the middle of the racetrack in there, and I just don't think she ever had a fair chance. And something may have gone wrong, too, because now she's out for 2 months, and she had been running so much better than that. Now, obviously, she's not running fast enough races to beat the favorite, but she really has improved quite a bit for Fernando Abreu, her last race notwithstanding. And she felt like a horse that is not so slow that she's going to be badly outrun, but she's not a forward horse to get in the way of La Bancara. And the more I looked through it, I felt like there's an argument to be made because she has a bunch of good races. And besides Jackson's Dixie, she's probably the most likely other horse if La Bancara doesn't run a race. If La Bancara runs a race, she cannot beat her. But I'm going to kind of hope she can, and I'll play a 5-6.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, if you're looking for somebody else, she seems like the one that if you make an excuse for last time, there are some races that put her right in the mix to be the horse that's either going to upset if La Banquera doesn't show up or potentially be the other one that you wanted. I just was a little bit worried about that last race, but I get that there
It's
could
fair.
be some excuses.
It's fair. It's absolutely fair. Her last race was bad, but it just seems like with the layoff and the ridiculous wide trip, maybe there's a reason. And you can forgive a bad last race if the horse is going to be a big price. You
Sure.
don't want to forgive them if they're short prices. Race number 8, a maiden special weight race. And we'll take a look at the favorite coming out of a race and Share the Loot, who I have third and you have third as well. I'm not sure what America's back to, but apparently America's back. Listen, Bakinda finally got it done with a perfect trip. She didn't come back and run particularly well. I'm not proud of this pick, Sarah, but I just thought she might be better than these. And with Share the Loot, To be honest, I thought Christopher Elliott gave her a sensational ride. I mean, she breaks from the far outside, or close to the outside. She's a horse that has issues coming out of the gate time after time, and maybe post 13 is good for her because breaking from the far outside could help her.
Yeah, won't get in
but
the way.
I don't know how she can get a better trip than Christopher gave her last time. I thought he really rode her well.
Well, and also, if you're looking for somebody else, do you really want to go all the way to the outside with the horse who's had more chances and has
Isn't a
faced some
big price and it was 4 lengths behind the favorite.
and doesn't get
Fair.
out of the gate? So I think that there are credentials, of course, and you look at the numbers this horse has run, as well as a couple of horses this one has faced. One of them going to be in the Florida Derby later today. And is it Tapan or Tappan?
It's Tapan. It's
Tapan.
Tapan Street.
Yes, we talked about this. Okay.
Seabick yelled at me on his show after I said Tapan Street 3 times, and then, of course, he wasn't listening. He's probably busy doing something else while he's on the air, and he said Tappan Street. And I said Tapan Street. I heard you. No, you didn't. Anyway, Teote. We have a very different opinion in this race. You like Teote? I hate this
You do
horse,
not.
but I'll let you talk about her.
I mean,
him.
look, this one, half to 4 winners on debut, but I just thought looking at this one, didn't really take any money first time out, which is kind of unusual for these connections, and just kind of showed up with a number that's similar enough to, with natural progression, to the horse that's going to be your favorite, America's Back. And I understand not necessarily liking this race, but I thought that this was one that was trying to maintain some sort of position in there and maybe just a little bit green overall in the stretch in here and didn't get the job done. And I think that Grand Cash, for the big price this horse has been, that horse is okay enough to suggest that maybe overall this one could benefit from that first race and take a little bit of a step forward in here and just could be the alternative that at least has a race that could be fast
Who's
enough.
riding? Do you know?
Michael Sanchez.
Okay. This is a Brad Cox horse that didn't take a nickel first time out. And I'm not sure this horse was even a shorter price than the winner of the race, who was a first-time starter for Dave Duggan. It was an inside track. The problem is this horse rode the inside for the vast majority of the race. And this was a weird race because Mo for the King looked like he was done, and he came back on and rallied.
Right.
Now, he had the benefit of the racetrack as well, but it's not like Teote was really against the racetrack. And I did not like this horse's race. I thought that he had an absolute dream trip, and he got there, and he couldn't even get second. So listen, we see things differently. You may well be right, and I may well be wrong. But I was against that horse, the horses who had ran. I had the 4 Toga Dan second because at least this horse did a little running, was outside. The track was fair that day. But, this horse I thought at least did some running early, gets what I thought was a positive switch to Eric Cancel, who I think has been riding very well. And I just thought this horse was a little interesting as one for TT to maybe improve second time outs. That's my weirdo in here. I'm going to try to get the 4 into the number. But
All right.
could obviously have to improve. Race number 9. So let's start with Quick Hammer, who you have 4th and I have 3rd, and I'm guessing David has favored.
Yes.
I don't know what to do with this horse, but the rail was good last time, and J.D. Factor came back and lost. I don't know, Sarah, and obviously you kind of agree with me. I feel like this is a horse. I know he's the speed of the speed, but I just feel like he had that huge race out of nowhere. He obviously didn't come close to duplicating it last time with the racetrack. We've had a track that has been fair for the entire month of March. I just feel like this is a short price. I want to let beat me.
And
He may.
And I couldn't leave him out completely because he just does have that
Yeah, he may
high
just beat this
cruising
field,
speed,
yeah.
and so that worries me a little bit. But at a short price, he's just had such benefactors over his last 2 victories, where he was able to be forwardly placed and just win with an aberrant performance. And then, okay, he stumbles and he loses the rider, so then we were left with that big mystery of would we ever see something like that again? And then he does win, but was he ever really challenged in that race at all? I don't
Other
think
than
so.
today being a tribute show to Fernando Abreu, how is High Tide possibly going to win this race?
I just think that he's one that if you look back over his couple of races when he was with Rudy Rodriguez or on the dirt, he was facing some okay horses relative to the field that he's going to be in today. And I'm hoping that switch is positive in here, but it just seems like he's one that could take a little bit step forward in this barn, but also has those races coming in that don't really put him out of contention in here relative to the rest of this field. And if I don't trust Quick Hammer, and I think that other horses could be forward in here, who am I really supposed to think has been facing some horses that are just a little
Well,
bit tougher than these?
I think he's facing a lot of horses that are better than Majestic Frontier. And
Sure, but
I do get it. You're going to need a complete pace collapse. I looked at some stats. Fernando is 2 for 30 cutting back from routes to sprints with a 62-cent ROI. He's only tried it with one horse off the claim. That horse, I think, actually ran okay at 4-1, but didn't win. I gave this horse a long look. He's going to be a price. I wish you luck with him. I thought Baracho was just a very logical horse in this race. We'll look at him. I think it's important when you talk about Gray Wing and Gray Wing getting lucky. Well, he got lucky at the expense of this horse. You know, this horse really did all of the running in this race. I mean, he was fighting the whole way on the front end, and, you know, as opposed to Honorary Degree, who was picking up pieces. He was claimed by Greg DePrima. And Gray Wing, I thought he did all the work. I don't totally trust him, but I think if he runs back to his last race, he's going to be a handful. He draws well towards the outside. He doesn't need the lead to win, and I thought he ran super in this race. And if he runs back to this race, I think he's the horse to beat.
yeah, I mean, if you can excuse the race 2 back, he has plenty of races and forward position that put him right there. I mean, he was able to put some races over sloppy or muddy sealed tracks together that put him in contention. He has the speed, and I thought that he ran very well on the circuit last time. So I think that he's a contender too. No argument with that.
Let's take a look at Brajol, who I've got second. I know the horse looks slow, but I would prefer a horse like this if I'm looking for a closer, who I know can be effective going long. This was an excellent ride by Lane Luzzy, sort of waited. He's the number 2 horse, and he's angling out now, but he sat on the rail for a good 70 to 75%, probably 75 or more percent of this race. So while he rallied on the outside, he had spent so much time in the rail, and yeah, he got a decent setup, but, you know, I mean, Nunzio's, you know, kind of been a massive disappointment, but these are okay horses to run against, and I realize from a figure standpoint, he's probably a little light, but I thought if the race came apart, he was the one you wanted. He has been in really good form. I think you were on with me last time, and you were making a case for him.
I was, and now
as
I'm
being
bitter.
in great form. I just thought he was kind of the right closer if you wanted a closer in here.
Yeah, no, I liked him 2 starts ago. I thought he got a great ride that day to finish second, and then I was a little bit bitter because I didn't pick him last time, and he won with a
I'm a
great
little
ride
bitter
again.
for other reasons in
Yeah,
general,
just
but
a
that's
little.
a whole other. I'm not really a bitter guy.
I think that I've just been burned a little bit by him, and he needs to get just a little bit faster. But look,
And he's a last
he
time
can
was the time.
definitely win.
He's a last time was the time horse as well at a decent price, getting
Right.
it done. What is the iconic legacy story?
He just has some consistency coming in, and if I wanted somebody that was a little bit of a new face here, it just seems like he's been able to put together some races out of town that fit with these. If he can have that right kind of trip, he's not necessarily going to need to be right up and on the pace, but he's not going to need to be so far back either and anticipate this race falling apart. So I thought that he would get the right kind of trip. And I also like that Kendrick has been riding him out of town, and then he comes here, and now he gets Abner Adorno, which he has the level of races that I think could fit in this spot. So I just wanted somebody that has at least been showing up with similar kind of performances over his last several starts.
This trainer hasn't won a race in his 4 starts, but his horses have all run fairly well. We'll see what happens. Race number 9, one of the more interesting races in today's card. Race number 10, shame on some of you for scratching out in here, and I'm serious. I mean, you know.
This could have been a really
this is
competitive
ridiculous.
race.
I think, except for maybe one of these, they're all private vet scratches, and I'm a little annoyed by this race, to be honest with you, that 7 horses scratched out of this race. It ain't that tough a race, guys.
No.
So there's Grooven, and we'll look at Grooven, who I scratched into, was my 3rd choice in here. I don't know where he was for you. And listen, he was one of the horses to beat as it was. And while I really like Unlimited Potential, I tried him in this race again. I tried him in this race against him, Sarah, and he ran really well, but Grooven just crushed him, as it turned out, and he's in such good form. I thought about going 10-9 to switch it around, but doesn't it feel like Supreme Law is going to be dogging Unlimited Potential around here, and Grooven will just be sitting there? I mean, if one of these 2 horses doesn't win, I'm going to lose here.
Yeah, I liked Grooven prominently before more than half the field came out. I like him still now with this reduced group of horses because he's just had races over his last really 3-4 starts where he's been running extremely well. And while I don't necessarily anticipate that we're going to see that 99 Beyer speed figure that we saw 2 back, which was an aberration from his other races around this time, the race last time is good enough to win. The race 3 starts ago is good enough to get it done here. And I just thought that with who's left, he's a standout now.
The one thing I'll say about him is his last race I don't think was as good as his one before that. And so you do want, because let's be honest, this guy kind of overnight with the trainer who's had great success with limited starter, just getting into training horses on his own. You do kind of wonder because his last race was a one, but I don't think it was as good as one before that. Not just from a speed figure standpoint, but from any speed figure you look at, it's going to be a worse effort. So that worries me a little bit. And he's going to be 4 to 5 or less in this
You
race,
would have to
isn't he? I
think.
mean, obviously the morning line means absolutely nothing here, and it's going to be him and unlimited potential. But you and I don't see anybody else. And while Supreme Law's been in great form out of town, you tell him he's going to deal with unlimited potential, and even if that one lets him clear, he's going to come after him. And I mean,
And his last two really big numbers, they're over a wet track, and now he's going to be in a spot where he didn't deliver at a very short price last time, and is there going to be another horse that wants to be forward with him? I didn't see the case to put him over the 9 or the 10.
I'm with you completely as we come upon our last race, race number 11. And we want to thank everybody in race number 11 for deciding to stick around and participate. We appreciate your
14
support.
horses.
You got Mark's horse on the outside, the 14, Forever to Go, and I'm a little disappointed when Miss American Pie did the other day. Maybe it was because I bet her, and she stunk, but I don't want to hold that really against this horse. My concern is, who is Forever to Go? Is he the horse that ran the 74, or she the horse that ran the 74 2-back? Or is she a horse that blew a huge lead last time out to a horse that came back and didn't run particularly well? But the good news for her is today is 6, last time was 7, and maybe she just couldn't get the extra furlong.
And that's the thing where you have this horse who's had some experience relative to the rest of this group, draws all the way to the far outside, going to be one of the ones that takes some money in this spot because you do have that 74 and even the experience and the speed that we've seen from her in those other 2 starts. She's a player with all these first-time starters and unknowns, but do I really want to take a shorter price on such a wide open field where you do have a number that stands out relative to the other 2 dirt races?
She may be very tough to beat. What's going on with the 12 Cloudy Chance? You just love cloud computing?
Not so much, but I know that you're a fan of cloud computing. Just the damn side precocity with this one, and being a half to some decent horses as far as like Jack and Bernie. Winston's Chance was okay, and just really that win early type of pedigree from this one, as well as a dam that won first time out. It seemed to me that this race really centered around horses more drawn towards the outside in general.
Yeah, there are also some bad horses in that family as well, and Richard Chance was a pretty cool horse. I agree. I think one of the things that's going to attract attention about this horse, perhaps, is Jose Lezcano riding. And I think that's a legitimate thing to attract attention. The problem is, it's my understanding he picked this horse up on the draw. He wasn't, it's not like he was deciding to ride this horse. So that kind of swayed me against a horse that I agree has some pedigree. I like Julita here. It's no surprise that I'm a big fan of Dave Duggan, but this horse broke a good 2 lengths slow in that race and had a good trip thereafter, but broke slow, now gets Lasix in there. We've talked about it, how David's horses have improved somewhat in their second starts. And I thought this was the one out of all of them that could improve. I think Sunshine Lily is going to take a reasonable amount of money in here, the number 10.
I looked at that one.
Coming in from Tampa. And I'm not going to be surprised. This is a New York bred. It's not they didn't try last time, but it's probably a horse that will run better second time out. It was there were some interesting horses in that race, and I think that horse has to be considered somewhat dangerous.
Well, and the horse was also 58-1, so were they really thinking that that was going to be the day? Probably not.
Well, it's a New York bred running against open horses, and Chad Brown had 1 or 2 in there, so it's a big field. What is the Lollipop story? I have Lollipop second.
You tell me.
I do. Because now, I don't know. I thought about calling P.J. Campos, but he's not Eric's agent anymore, so I couldn't call him. Eric rode the 2, Truly Magic, who on paper is a real contender in here.
Yes,
and he shows up in the TT's first-time stars, an Honest Mischief, who's been live as a sire. And I thought this horse could be interesting for him. He was the first-time star. She was the first-time star I wanted to use in here.
Yeah, interesting race.
Yeah, I think it is. Fun race to close it out. And we have 14 in here. They were somewhat immune to the flu. All right, Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Head over to NYRA Bets. If you're not a member of NYRA Bets, no better time than the present. Use the promo code MATCH200 and we'll match the $200 of your initial deposit. We have a pick 6 carryover. It starts in race number 6 for our 11 race card, $19,185. We have a bankroll builder in the Arkansas Derby today. Bet 50 to win or lose. You will get $20 towards your Derby bankroll. I guess the second to last weekend of bankroll builders. We also have cross-country pick 5, 3 at Oaklawn, all stakes, 2 here, the 10th and 11th. And we are on basically from noon and 12:30 until 8 But we are 12:30 to just before 4, 3:55. Then we'll take a little break, come back at 4:30 until 8. We're on FS2 until just before 7. Then FS1, 7 to 8. I believe FS1 will also be covering from 5 to 7, though there's some question of that, but you can check out and see if that's the case. We'll let you know. And we're done. Chris Griffin up next. The reprise of Scratches and Changes. Have a great day.
Horse racing? Check. Weekly promotions? Got 'em. Huge payouts? You bet. With Naira Bets. Download the app today and bet on any track, anywhere, anytime with live HD horse races, betting tips and tutorials, expert picks, and more. You bet with Naira Bets. Join now for a new member bonus at NairaBets.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Aqueduct. At this time, we ask that you please rise, remove your caps as we honor America with the playing of the national anthem. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the New York Racing Association and live racing at Aqueduct. A Saturday afternoon of great racing action. 11 races on today's card, and the track is fast. A pick six carryover on the afternoon. Pick six carryover starts in today's sixth race, $19,185. Pick six with a carryover starts in race 6 here today. Coming up, today's scratches and changes at Aqueduct. Race 1, beginning of the early pick 5, is clear. No changes in today's first. Race 2, started the early pick 4. Scratch the 2, Gone and Forgotten. Scratch the 5, Pistol is Ablazing. In today's third race, scratch the 1, Liberté de Bayou. Scratch the 1A, Just Call Ray. Scratch the 3, Cold as Hell. Scratch the 4, I See You Lookin'. Rider change on the number 5 in race 3, Jose Lescano. And scratch the 8, Tetsu. Race 4, there will be a pick 5, a mandatory payout pick 5, starting in today's fourth race. Scratch the 4, Into Inspiration. Scratch the 9, Engineer. Race 5, beginning of the middle pick 4. Jockey change on the 1, make it Lane Luzzy. Scratch the 6, Scat to Tap. Scratch the 9, Colloquy. Race 6 will be the beginning of the pick 6. Carryover, $19,185. The 4 is 2 pounds overweight. Scratch the 6, Gallipoli Girl. Race 7, post time, will be 3:51. Beginning of the late pick 5. Scratch the 1, Ambitiously Placed. Scratch the 3, Maggie T. Scratch the 7, Floge. Race 8, post time, will be 4:33. Beginning of the late pick 4. Jockey change on the 12, make the jockey Omar Hernandez Moreno. And the 12 is a Regling. The 13, 2 pounds overweight. Race 9, Rider change on the 1, make it Romero Mirage. Scratch the 6, Funny Joke. Today's 10th race, scratch the 1, Prince Colton. Scratch the 1A, Divine Miracle. Scratch the 2, Legal Deal. Scratch the 3, Smilemon. Scratch the 4, Street Swag. Scratch number 5, Skylander. Scratch the 6, Wild Banker. And race 11, the 8 is +2. Jockey change on the 13, make the rider Sylvester Gonzalez. 11 races on today's program. The track is rated fast. A pick 6 carryover, $19,185 in that pick 6. The carryover and the pick 6 starts in today's 6th race with 11 races on today's program. It's all coming up. Race 1 is next. Start of the early pick 5. 6 furlongs. Field of 7. Track is fast at Aqueduct. Good luck.
Horse racing? Check. Weekly promotions? Got 'em. Huge payouts? You bet. With Naira Bets. Download the app today and bet on any track, anywhere, anytime with live HD horse races, betting tips and tutorials, expert picks, and more. You bet with Naira Bets. Join now for a new member bonus at NairaBets.com.